Alright, so I wanted to talk about why Muramana is actually Sylas's best second item in the game. It seems strange that you wouldn't be going an AP item, and there is a reason why this item is actually his best item. First, I'm just going to go over the damages so you can see for yourselves, and then I'll explain why it works with his abilities and with his passive. You can actually use this on probably other mages. I think it's most strong on Sylas. There might be some other mage I'm missing or some other champion, but Sylas is the one that comes to mind. I'm sure some of you have seen my Diana thing. I think it still works on Diana, but I think it's a lot stronger on Sylas, and I'll explain why. But first, let's just show the damage with the Rod of Ages and the Muramana. I'm just going to do just one combo and we'll see the damage. So it does 1527, right? So now if I go to, standard build, and this is against, okay, I want to mention this is versus a target with MR and armor. Now, it's not going to have as much armor as maybe someone in a real game because armor is more than MR. So the damage might not be exactly the same as a real game, but the Muramana will still do more damage. It might not be just as drastic of a difference because Muramana does do physical damage. There will still be a big difference between them though. So let's go to standard build. Set it 1527. All right. I will type that in the chat just so we can see 1527. Now we go this and this. This is pretty standard build right now for Sylas. There is higher damage builds and I'll show that as well. But this is just pretty standard build. So did 1527. I'm going to do the same combo. And it did 1124. So you can see it did about 400 more damage, which is a massive damage difference. Now, it is worth mentioning Riftmaker obviously gives you HP, Omnivamp, right? That's a big thing to mention. So, let's go a more damage-oriented build, right? Let's go Shadowflame. Keep in mind, one thing, 10 is better against targets with low MR. And this target also has very low health, which means I'll hit the crit threshold very quickly. Still, Muramana does more damage, and I'll show that here. Yeah, this does 1414. So Muramana still did about 100 more damage. This is a target that I can always get critical damage on pretty easily because it's only 1000 HP, low MR, better pen, and just consistently hitting the same target. In a real game where you might hit multiple targets because someone flashes, maybe they have more HP, so it's harder to get them under. Muramana not only does more damage to a target, perfect situation for Shadowflame, it's going to be way more consistent damage for every single fight you are in. Short fights, extended fights, just more damage. It's more damage than Bruiser, obviously, because you're not spending gold on, HP. It's more damage than Burst. Alright, so now let me explain exactly why, after I showed you, why these abilities work and why it works with this passive. So now I can explain. So, while Muramana is an AD item, this makes every ability you deal do damage. So it essentially replaces an AP item. You can see the damage you're getting, 110 there. You can calculate how much AP you would need in replace as an AP item to get the same worth of damage from your spells. So for 110 damage with 120% AP scaling on your Q, you would need 91 AP. That's not a lot, right? Even Riftmaker gets you that with the passive. So for your Q, it's essentially the same. And if you go Shadowflame, obviously it's more by a decent amount. So for your Q, you're actually doing a little bit more damage with an AP item. About the same with Muramana though. W, 60%. So for 60%, let me get my numbers here. For 60%, you need 183 AP, which is basically 2 AP items. So you're doing a lot more damage with Muramana on your W than you would for an AP item. And that damage difference makes up way more than the Q damage difference from the AP item. Your E at 80%, same thing. You would need a 137 AP. No AP item in the entire game is giving you that besides Rabadon's. So again, Muramana beats out any AP item for damage on this. Any AP item in the game. So, not only do you get more damage on your spells, but your passive as well. Every time you auto... Let me talk about the passive a little bit more actually. So, this says 130% AD. That's actually not true. It's 30% AD, 30% AP. The reason it says 130 is because it takes your base AD as an auto attack. So like I have 174. Let me hit this dummy. This dummy has no armor, right? I have 174 AD, right? So if I hit this, there's 254. It's this. It's this plus the AP I have, essentially. Plus the 30% of the AD. So you're not actually getting 130% of this one item. It's your base AD plus 30%. So it scales the same as an AP item. So if this gives me 90 AD, it's essentially the same as a 90 AP item. So it's essentially the same. The difference is every single time I'm autoing, you see that 21 at the bottom, or for here, right? If there's 0, it's easier against a 0 armor target. Let's see here. Every time I auto, 32, right? Every single time I proc my passive, it's 32 extra damage. So that's not a ton, but when you get more damage from Mirror Mana on your spells, as well as every single auto you're doing is 32 damage, it's a big difference. And also, when I mentioned before with the 100% AD, you're actually getting, you know, 90 AD from this. So you can actually add that 90 AD into the auto. So not only am I getting the 32 damage you can see from the shock effect, I'm also getting 90 extra damage on my autos every single time I proc my passive. 90 extra damage, 90 extra damage, 90 extra damage. Okay, 90 extra damage on every single passive proc. So one combo times 4 passives. That's 360 damage just from my passive. And Q, W, E, all doing 110, that's 330. So in total, that's 690 damage just from Mirror Mana. From every combo. 690 damage from Mirror Mana from every single combo. Let's say I go an AP item. Let's just take 100 AP to make it easy. So if I have 100 AP from an item, I get 30 damage from my passive times 4. It's 120. That's already 240 less damage than Mirror Mana. Okay, so my Qs give me 120%, 120, plus another 120, plus 60% of 100, plus 60. So that's going to be 300, plus 80. That's going to be 380 damage versus the 690 from every single combo with Mirror Mana. You can see how every single combo you're doing 300 more damage with Mirror Mana. Now, I want to talk about what you build after this, because just because you're going Mirror Mana does not mean you go AD with the rest of the build. You can if you want. I mean, it works. It's not going to be better, but it works. You can if you want. The thing is, instead of going, you can even go full bruiser after this, right? Because as much as this is AD, obviously AP is still really good on Sylas. So you can still go, you know, Riftmaker, whatever you want, any AP item. What I think is best is just going haste and tank build after this. So you can go really any tank item, Spear Visage, Frozen Heart, Vandal Pipes even. Like, I don't think this is that great, but you can go it. Literally, any tank item that gives you haste is going to be good. Because if I get even one more rotation off, just one rotation, that's 4 more passive procs times the 265, plus this, plus this, plus this. And if you calculate it out, it's 1796. So from one AP item, you're only getting 319 damage on your combo versus the 1796. So if you want to make up that damage, that means you'd have to do 5.5 combos, essentially 6 combos with that one AP item to make up the damage of one singular extra combo. Now if I get a second combo, it's even more. So that's just the strength of Mirror Mana. I mean, you can kind of ignore these other items, right? Whereas I think tank is good after these items. You know, you can go bruiser if you want. My whole point is that I think Mirror Mana is Sylas's second best item, and I kind of proved that. No matter what way you spin it, it's just more damage. You can argue Riftmaker if you want, because you can argue the defensive stats and the Omnivamp, sure. But when we're talking straight damage, Shadowflame, anything else, Mirror Mana is Sylas's second best item by far.